Was the example of Bob Dylan very important when you moved into music professionally?
Uh, of course, I loved his stuff as soon as I heard it, but I had been doing that sort of thing for a long time, and I'd been writing poems for a long time, and I'd published several books before I'd ever heard Dylan, and I was living in a certain sense in the same kind of universe that he was living in. So that when I heard him, of course I recognized his genius, but I also recognized a certain brotherhood in the work, and we have since become acquaintances, I might even say friends. If he's playing in a town, if he comes to Montreal, for instance, he'll call me up to come to his concert, and I'll do the same thing if I know where he is. So there is some kind of communion between us.
Mm-hmm. So you don't feel what many critics, with whom I don't agree because I like him very much, but many critics say, well, what you've been saying, that people felt at some stage about you, that he's over the hill and past his prime as a writer and all that.
Dylan?
Yes.
Dylan, to my way of thinking, is the Picasso of song. Yeah, people came to me when he put out his Christian records and said, this guy's finished, he can't speak to us anymore. I thought those were some of the most beautiful gospel songs that have ever entered the whole landscape of gospel music. When you're talking about a man like Dylan, you can never write him off. I would never write off a writer like Norman Mailer, or a singer like Dylan, or a singer like Ray Charles. Those people are always going to come up with something beautiful.
Another more musical genius whom you've been working with is Phil Spector,
Mm-hmm.
with whom you did that fantastic album, Death of a Ladies' Man. Can you tell me something about that?
Well, I thought my instincts were right in working with Phil Spector. He's a writer and a musician and a musical mind that I have enormous admiration for, and I listened to his music all my life. And he came to a concert of mine that I gave in Los Angeles, and we went back to his house, and as the evening wore on, we found ourselves at the piano and we started to write some songs together. And we wrote for the next couple of months together. And I think we wrote some good songs. In the studio, he took over completely, and there were a lot of armed guards around. And he mixed the tapes without me. He confiscated them under armed guard. So I had, either the option of hiring my own private army and fighting it out with him in the street, or letting him take the tapes. So I had some reservations about the mixes, but I feel a lot more tender about the album now. I think it's a good album.
I just listened to it this afternoon again after some time, and yes.
Yeah, it's a true album. It's raw.
Is Phil Spector as crazy as people say he is?
Yes, he's a lot crazier than people say he is. But he's also a very sweet man. And when you meet him one-to-one, he's incredibly hospitable, incredibly generous. But when he has an audience, he becomes a performer of a kind of Medici magnitude. He becomes a medieval tyrant. And then it gets a little tricky.
Mm.
And there's also a lot of guns around and bullets falling out of 45s, and it does get a little tricky.
To get back to what we talked about before, the version Nick Cave did, which embodies the sort of despair you were singing about at that time. I notice in your newer work that there is despair, but there is also something else. Can you tell me something about that?
Well, one thing is that I've tried to change all my albums. There's been people accuse me of writing the same song over and over again using the same musical accompaniment, but I think if a discerning listener will find that there's uh, quite a difference musically in each of the albums. Uh, I think this new album is clear. There's a certain kind of clarity about it. Um, of course, you know that you're living in a butcher shop, and you look around and there's ample suffering. You don't have to look too far. So I think it's appropriate that there should be also that kind of sound in a man's voice if he's writing the kind of songs I am. But on the other hand, I don't feel a prevailing sense of despair. I feel I'm too old to be sad.
Is that, well, it's not a question. I know that it's related to what you write in the Book of Psalms.
Yes, it's very much related to that. You're not in charge of the whole show, anyways, and there is a reference that is not your own, and there is a source of mercy, and one can apply oneself to it.
You know that there are young bands like U2 who have been reaching out towards the same kind of, well, let's call it religiosity or whatever.
Well, it's just this sense that there is a holy element in this world, even though there are the places filled with butchers and murderers, and earthquakes, famine, and all kinds of catastrophe. We do sense there is a holy element in this world, and there are people rising up now who want to affirm that holy element.